The Bank of Canada has made its rate announcement and they are struggling. And a lot of that has to do with Trudeau's immigration policy. This is unprecedented levels of immigration that Trudeau is allowing into the country, which is affecting the housing market, our inflation rates, everything that Canada is dealing with right now that we are struggling to find a balance for can be led back to these immigration levels. Trudeau is not only ready to continue it, he's encouraging it, knowing that this is going to continue to be a problem. What is the time bomb that we are facing in the future? We do have a video today from B&N Bloomberg with an expert. He says a couple funny things later on in the video, but the things that we talk about that are important that we need to factor in with inflation and immigration are discussed. How this is going to impact Canada. Let's get into today's video.
You're watching The Open on B&N Bloomberg. I'm John Ehrlichman. We are less than 30 minutes away from the next decision on interest rates from the Bank of Canada. And one of the things in this higher interest rate...
They made the announcement they held interest rates, which, I've said in other videos, I thought they were going to hold. It's way too early. If they cut now, the Canadian dollar against USD would get smashed, and then inflation would get worse. It sucks for a lot of people. They want rates to go down. Debt levels are getting tough, but it's something they kind of had to do.
Environment that people have been talking about is the housing market. Obviously, higher rates complicates things for renters. It complicates things for mortgage holders. So there are a lot of people that are interested in seeing lower rates. But what was very interesting is the trend with home prices. Yes, they've come off their peaks, but perhaps they have not come down as much as some may have thought, given higher interest rates. Ed Devlin is back with us, founder of Devlin Capital, senior fellow at the C.D. Howe Institute, and former head of Canadian portfolio management at PIMCO. And this is a day where we will, beyond getting an interest rate decision, no change expected in rates from the Bank of Canada, but we'll get some additional commentary on how they're thinking about the economy. How are you thinking about the dynamics in the housing market right now?
They did say in some of their comments they are becoming more open to the idea of rate cuts. There's a bit of dovish language, which is good. We kind of want to hear it. The cuts do need to happen later, but at least we got some better language.
So, I think this flood of immigration post-pandemic has really complicated the situation, right? So normally I would have thought with interest rates moving up, 500 basis points, housing would have corrected significantly, and it's not. It's come off a little bit, but it's because of this immigration thing. I'm really interested in how the evolution of the dynamics between immigration and housing and immigration and productivity. Because immigration and productivity is bringing in a lot of people, but a lot of them are at school. So school isn't producing a lot of GDP, right? The other thing is, how about, these people have to live somewhere.
Yeah.
And so these are dynamics that the bank, I don't think really can control, but...
Yes, because it's being done by Justin Trudeau and the Liberal government. Because what people don't understand is, a lot of people will say, well, it can't be immigrants buying all the houses. They're not working high-paying jobs. So I'm a real estate agent in London, Ontario. Reach out to me in the link below if you do want to work with me or anybody in my network across Canada. We can handpick somebody for you. That being said, what we see as real estate agents is immigrants are way more willing to get into mortgages that have more than one person on the mortgage. They'll put 3 people on the mortgage, 4 people on the mortgage just to get into the market and buy that house. There's also a lot of fraud happening, but the fact is they will sign on with multiple people. So maybe they all only make 40K or 50K, 3-4 people with that income. All of a sudden they can get into an $800,000, $900,000, $1 million home. And then you have all those people contributing to the household income. They do work together to their credit, and we can't blame immigrants for saying hey, you guys invited us over. We need somewhere to live. We're buying houses. That's not their fault, except for the fraud ones. But the problems is what's going on with the government, how they're not stopping it. 1.3 million immigrants in a year. We're at 2.4 in 2 years. It's crazy.
It does affect inflation, which is their primary objective. And so are they going to generally kind of look past it, or are they kind of very concerned? I think at some point they'll look past it, but there is a level of concern up there.
Well, the tight supply part of it, I've heard a lot of guests, people who are economists, talking about. We'll get a good sense on how many people have been sitting on the sidelines waiting for an opportunity to come into the market, because, to your point, prices did not deteriorate as much as some were hoping for, because you do have a support behind the housing market. And does that become an inflationary concern for the Bank of Canada?
So this is why it's a little frustrating, because they talk about the actual house prices being inflationary for the Bank of Canada, but it's not the price of the house. It's, the average cost of the housing. So they factor in the payments, which includes the rates, which means if the mortgage rates come down, even if prices go up a little bit, they don't go crazy, whatever, in theory, it actually shouldn't negatively impact inflation, because the rates falling will bring down the mortgage overall, because they'll be paying less interest rates, which means, okay, even if a house goes up by, let's say, $100,000 in purchase price, but the rates have been cut by 2 or 3%, in theory, that average monthly payment should still be lower, which means it shouldn't make inflation worse. So it's kind of like finding that balancing act of like, how much are prices going to go up versus the payments going down, because a house price can go up and the payment can go down by a lot if the rates are down. That's, the tough math that people forget about.
Usual inflationary concern to be thinking about if they commit to lower interest rates.
If house prices move up and shelter costs move up, that's inflationary.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's the payment, though.
And it's inflationary when they move interest rates higher and all mortgage costs go up and all that kind of stuff happens. But if you move it down and prices move up, that also has a bit of an inflationary effect. So we're kind of this exogenous shock that is this immigration that's happened that's basically uncontrolled or doesn't really plan for. It's going to take some time to work through the system, and this is a big, issue facing the bank.
Well, we're seeing
we can't outbuild this immigration. That's the problem. So he did say what I was saying there, it can change the payment, but we can't outbuild this immigration. We have to cut it. That's just it. At the end of the day, we have to lower substantially our levels of immigration. It has to stop. It cannot keep up at the rate that we are at, because what people always forget, and nobody's talking about this. I don't think I've seen here. Correct me down below if anybody's talked about this, because I personally have not heard this. This amount of population growth is obviously going to make our food costs way higher as well, right? Like, I don't know how that's not mentioned, that if we got 2.4 million people in 2 years, that's 2.4 million more mouths to feed who are buying products off the shelves. They're buying whatever it is. It's food, it's cleaning products, it's all of these things. Like, it's more insurance issues potentially, like things that are going up. And then, of course, rents is a big thing, because these people, they need somewhere to live. We don't have the supply. And like I said earlier, they'll pile 8, 9, especially, honestly, one of the bigger groups, like these groups of Indian students, will pile in as many people as you'll allow them to go. So like, these people are willing to go into whatever unit, but again, they're buying food, they're going to fast food restaurants, they're doing these things, which is making these costs higher on top of the carbon tax. And so it's like, what is, if we remove the carbon tax, we cut immigration, food purchasing will go down. I have these things. It's like, there's so many options here that the population increasing that rapidly is obviously going to have a negative impact on food costs and other things, I would think. Correct me down below, guys, if I'm wrong.
Growing pains from it, but at the same time, I think everyone would ask, if we weren't going down this road to help our economy for the long term, what would we be doing? We might
invest in resources, encourage Canadian families to have more kids, make it easier, obviously bringing down inflation, making it more affordable. If you're Canadian and you're watching this, please try and have some kids. But yeah, let's resource focused economy would be way better for Canada versus an immigration focused economy, which is nothing because you don't produce anything.
Look more like a lot of European nations right now. One thing I did want to ask you about, Ed, though, you talked about productivity. What's increasingly come up is the fact that in this country, the fact that you have to commit so much of your time, your energy, your resources, your capital to housing, does that limit our overall productivity? It is ironic if you think about where we were going back to the financial crisis, where the housing horrors were in the United States. Canadians were not as levered as they are today. Our economy navigated relatively well. It actually invited people borrowing money to get into the housing market. And for some people who became homeowners, I suppose that was a big investment win. But here we are now with these deeply indebted households. Do you think that ultimately that plays a role in our longer term productivity? Just the fact that people have to put so much of their time and money towards housing.
As a real estate agent, again, you see it when I have these conversations with clients and we're kind of planning how much of their life needs to be planned around their purchase because of what it's going to impact to their cost. And if all of their money is going towards the house, it's like, but again, they're left without a choice because it's like, we need somewhere to live, whether they're renting or they're buying. They have to spend so much more time planning around their living. And it's like, of course, Canadians are not that productive when we do have to spend. I'm a real estate agent. You think I'd want the market to be booming? I want a way more steady, average, healthy market because I care about Canada doing better versus, the real estate market going up by 2% extra.
Yeah. So let me just on the immigration. I'll talk about probably immigration. Let me be clear. I'm very pro-immigration. It just has to be controlled, and I think generally Canada's had a good immigration policy, and I'm very for.
Okay. This is why I'm laughing, because every time they bring on these talking heads, it's always like, I just want to make it clear. I'm very pro-immigration. I'm very pro-immigration. Don't get mad at me, please. I want to keep this above board. I'm very pro-immigration. Like, they just do all this extra level to like protect themselves. And it's like, I get it. I've said it too. Like, yeah, we do need some level of immigration in Canada, but it's always like, I just want to make it clear. I just want to make it clear. Like, that's what he's doing there.
For it. But bringing 1 million people in the door in a year, probably not the smartest thing to do. Back to the productivity question. Productivity, I think, is, I'm always very skeptical of a lot of these calculations because, how do you compare, Canada's oil patch to the U.S. Silicon Valley, and all these numbers. But to your point about a disproportionate allocation to residential housing, I think that is true, and I do think that probably is a bit of a drag on Canadian productivity, relatively speaking. By the way, the Australians have the same issue. A lot of other countries have the same issue.
Yeah.
Yep, and definitely a lot of countries are dealing with productivity issues. And again, Australia's a perfect example because they're so similar to us in Canada, where they aren't producing as much and they're relying way more on housing and immigration and all these things. But then the problem is your workers become less productive. Your inflation continues to skyrocket. So again, it just comes down to we need to start having more kids and cut the immigration. And reach out to me in the link below if you want to reach out to me. We can discuss your real estate plans. Have a great rest of your day. Don't forget to like and subscribe as well.